All right, so welcome, comrades. Peace, how y'all doing? My name is Nino Brown. I'm an organizer with the Boston branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm so excited to be with y'all today. I'm in Comrade Jodi Dean. Comrade Jodi, this is the part 2 of our Comrade series discussion. We've been studying this book, Jodi's book, Comrade. And this is installment 2. If y'all don't know, Jodi is an author, an activist, has written several books, Democracy and Other Neoliberal Fantasies, The Communist Horizon, Comrade, Crowds and Party, and many others. And today we're going to be discussing 4 theses on the Comrade, which is also chapter 3 in this book. So the structure of this webinar, Jodi is going to open up, speak for roughly 20 minutes or so. Then we're going to kind of get into some questions that I have, and then some questions that folks are going to type into the chat, and we'll kind of filter them through there. So we're also going to end around 5:55 for other activities. And before we move on, just wanted to announce, if comrades did not already know, that Senator Bernie Sanders has withdrawn himself from the presidential race. And tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific, I believe, and 8 p.m. Eastern. Yep, 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. Eastern. Comrade Gloria Lariva is going to be addressing everyone and talking about the need for continued struggle for socialism, a need for continued struggle against capitalism, Bernie or no Bernie, right? So make sure you tune into that. It's on the Facebook page, it's on our Twitter page, and it'll also be on YouTube, all streaming live. But without further ado, I'm going to stop there and give it up to Comrade Jodi to introduce himself, and we'll get this thing started. So go ahead, Comrade Jodi.
Great. Thanks so much, Comrade Nino. And thanks everyone for coming into the seminar. This is the second webinar that's drawing from my book, Comrade, an essay on political belonging. And last week, I introduced the idea of comrade as a mode of address, carrier of expectations, and figure of political belonging. Comrades are those who share a politics, those who are on the same side. And I talked about the difference between comrade and other kinds of relations, right? The comrade's not the same as relations between kin, neighbors, citizens, friends, or allies. Next week, in our final session on Comrade, I'll talk about what happens when comradeship ends, when people are no longer comrade. Today, what I'm going to do is talk about, present 4 theses on the Comrade. And these theses are ways of unpacking the idea of comradeship, are ways of exploring what's at stake when people are comrades. So I will begin with thesis 1. Thesis 1, comrade names a relation characterized by sameness, equality, and solidarity. For communists, this sameness, equality, and solidarity is utopian, cutting through the determinations of hierarchy and value that come from capitalist society. So let me spell out what this thesis means. You recall last week that we got Alexandra Kollontai's emphasis on comradeship between men and women. As we learn from her, comrade points to a mode of belonging opposed to the isolation, hierarchy, and oppression of bourgeois forms of relation, particularly of work in the family under capitalism. Comradeship is a mode characterized by equality, solidarity, and respect. Collectivity replaces egoism and self-assertion. As comrades, people are equal. They are on the same side, fighting for the same future. Patriarchal capitalism tells men and women that what is most significant are the differences between them. Each has their own place and role. Communist movement seeks to overturn and abolish these hierarchies, replacing them with equality, solidarity, and mutual respect. The Russian Soviet writer Maxim Gorky has a short story titled Comrade that gives us another example. Gorky presents comrade as a word that had come to unite the whole world, to lift all men up the summits of liberty and bind with new ties, the strong ties of mutual respect. His story depicts a dismal, torturous city, a city of hostility, violence, and humiliation and rage, where the weak submit to the dominance of the strong. But in the midst of this miserable suffering, one word rings out: comrade. The people cease to be slaves, they refuse to submit, they become conscious of their strength. They recognize that they themselves are the force of life. When people say comrade, they change the world. So one of Gorky's examples in this story is a woman he describes as a prostitute who feels a hand on her shoulder and then weeps with joy as she turns around and hears the word comrade. With this word, she is hailed not as a self-commodifying object to be enjoyed by another, but as an equal in common struggle against the very conditions requiring commodification. Other examples in Gorky's story are a beggar, a coachman, and some young militants, for all of whom comrade shines like a star that guides them to the future. So like Kollontai, Gorky associates the word comrade with freedom from servitude and oppression, with equality. And like Kollontai, he presents the comrade as opposed to capitalism's egoistic exploitation, hierarchy, competition, and misery. Finally, like Kollontai, Gorky links comradeship to a struggle for and vision of a future in which all will be comrades. But who is our comrade? One of the questions that came up last week involved people in other parties or from other traditions. How do we know who our comrades are? This leads to the second thesis. Anybody, but not everybody, can be a comrade. And to illustrate this thesis, we're going to see a short clip from the 1939 film Nieniczka by Ernst Lubitsch. So Marissa, can you show the clip?
Oh, this is a fine thing. Maybe we've missed him already.
How can we find somebody without knowing what he looks like?
That must be the one.
Yes, he looks like a comrade.
Yes.
Heil Hitler.
No, that's not him.
Positively not.
So what are we going to do now?
I don't know.
This is...
Terrible.
We must have missed him. But be the one who sent him.
I'm looking for Michael Simonovich Ironov.
I am Michael Simonovich Ironov.
I'm Nina Ivanovna Yakushova, envoy extraordinary, acting on the direct orders of Comrade Commissar Rosinin. Present with your colleagues.
Comrade Polyanov.
Comrade.
Comrade Kopalski.
Comrade.
What a charming idea for Moscow to surprise us with a lady, comrade.
If we had known, we would have greeted you with flowers.
Yes.
Don't make an issue of my womanhood. We're here for work, all of us. Let's not waste any time. Shall we go?
Porter.
Here, please.
What do you want?
May I have your bags, madame?
Why?
He's a porter. He wants to carry them.
Why? Why should you carry other people's bags?
Well, that's my business, madame.
That's no business. That's social injustice.
That depends on the tip.
So one of the things that we see that in this clip is that anyone could be a comrade, but not everyone. Some people are clearly not comrades. They're enemies, right? The Nazi there. The three trade officials, Iranov, Bulyanov, and Kopalski, who are looking around the train station trying to find their comrade, can't figure out who their comrade is by looking at them. Why? Because identity has nothing to do with comradeship. That anyone, but not everyone, can be a comrade accentuates how comrade names a relation that is at the same time a division. Comradeship is premised on inclusion and exclusion. Anyone, but not everyone, can be a comrade. It's not an infinitely open or flexible relation, but one that presupposes division and struggle. There is an enemy. The fact of an enemy, of struggle, is the condition for comradeship, but it doesn't determine the relation between comrades. Comrades are those on the same side of the division. So with respect to this division, they are the same. Their sameness is that of those who are on the same side. To say comrade is to announce a belonging and the sameness that comes from being on the same side. So you can see this example of sameness also in military, particularly in the military expression comrade in arms. The term comrade in arms designates those who fight on the same side against an enemy, another military, or another set of comrades in arms. Additionally, that anybody, but not everybody, can be a comrade does not mean that those who are not our comrades are our enemies. Someone might be a bystander, someone who's politically disengaged, or they might be an ally with interest of their own that temporarily overlap with ours. Also, anyone could be our comrade in the future, but not everyone. Thesis 3. The individual as a locus of identity is the other or opposite of the comrade. Last week, someone asked whether we would be or have comrades after communism. And I have to say, I'm not fully sure of the answer. I think it's possible we might still have political disagreements about, say, whether to build a school or a hospital, or maybe where to build it. It's also possible that we will need to continue to struggle against egoism and individualism. And here, comradeship remains important because, as the third thesis tells us, comradeship designates a relation, not an individual identity. So some examples. There is a obituary in the Soviet newspaper Pravda that ran in 1925 that praised someone who had recently died. And the obituary said, Comrade Nestorenko had no personal biography and no personal needs. Right? That's the way Pravda was praising this guy who had died. No personal biography and no personal needs. The film Ninotchka shows that an issue should not be made of the comrade's womanhood. All have work to do. Similarly, or likewise, comrade is a term of address that attaches to proper names like Comrade Yakushova, Comrade Nino. The proper name, Yakushova or Nino, carries the individual identity. The term of address, comrade, asserts a sameness. A couple of years ago, after the demo in DC that we had that was against the White House rally of the KKK, one of our PSL comrades joyfully said to me, "We don't even need to know each other's names, we're comrades." The Russian philosopher Oksana Timofeyeva emphasizes that in comradeship, identity vanishes. She gives the example of the disguises and masquerades used by Bolsheviks during their period of undercover. Right? Anyone could be a comrade under that mustache. The historian Ellen Schrecker gives another example. She gives a statement, she reports a statement from a US general who was an official during the McCarthy era. And this guy was really suspicious of communists because, in his words, it was almost impossible to spot them since they no longer use membership cards or other written documents which will identify them for what they are, end quote. So in these examples from Schrecker and from Oksana Timofeyeva, it's the generic comrade who appears, masking an individual person, one of many. It could be anyone. Schrecker also quotes a guy named Herbert Philbrick, who was an undercover informer, quote, "Anyone can be a communist. Anyone can suddenly appear as a Communist Party member, close friend, brother, employee, or even employer, leading citizen, trusted public servant." The commonality or sameness of comrade arises not out of our identity, not out of who one is, but out of what is being done, right? Party work, mass work, campaigning, studying, struggling. Political comrades are those on the same side. Communist comrades are those struggling to emancipate society from capitalism and create new egalitarian modes of free association and collective decision-making for common benefit. For anti-communists, The instrumentalism of comrade relations appears horrifying. The fact that relations between comrades are means, right? Relations that we are involved in to get things done. So the fact that the relations are means rather than ends in themselves seems morally objectionable. Like we're treating other people as tools or instruments and like this is wrong. But it's the objection that's wrong because it fails to grasp how political work focuses on ends beyond the individual and necessarily requires collective coordination. The objection ignores how political relations are just one set of our relations with other people, not the sum total of all our social relations. Remember, like we discussed last time, comrades are not the same as kin, friends, neighbors, or citizens. Here's another example from the wonderful Vivian Gornick book, The Romance of American Communism. A former CP member described his life of meetings, actions, May Day parades, selling the Daily Worker, and endlessly discussing Marx and Lenin. He describes all this as beyond good or bad. It was sweeping and powerful, intense, absorbing, filled with a kind of comradeship I never again expect to know. So the comrade saw himself as useful, as living in the service of a struggle of world historical significance. His actions were not individual, they were moments in collective struggle, instances through which the collective power of the party could appear. Precisely because he was engaged with others in common purpose, the comrade experienced deep political meaning. So we have to reject the bourgeois fiction that intimacy depends on personal disclosure, individual experience, or the way that a singular person feels about people and events. There are other intimacies of common work and shared purpose, preparing the newspaper, making the banners, planning an action, knocking on doors. Now, Marx used the term comrade in a variety of ways, including as a designation for those in the same political party. He also used the word party in a couple of different ways, sometimes using the word party to refer to a formal organization, and other times using the word party to refer to the broader political movement. For example, in his letter to Kugelmann on the Paris Commune, Marx praised our heroic party comrades in Paris. The communards he is referring to here were not his comrades in a specific party, but in the party understood in the broad historical sense. They were all on the same side, that of real people's revolution. In a text for the International Working Man's Association, IWA, written in 1866, Marx draws out this political dimension of comrade. He writes, "It is one of the great purposes of the association to make the workmen of different countries not only feel but act as brethren and comrades in the army of emancipation. More than union brothers involved in local and national struggles, members of the IWA would be comrades in international political struggle, fighting on the side of their class in the struggle of labor against capital. Their common condition as workers needed to become the basis for a common politics, a shared political orientation. As comrades in an army of emancipation, they would combine and generalize their efforts. No longer would the differences between foreign and domestic workers be able to be used against them. As comrades, they were all the same." The idea that comrades are those who belong to the same side of a political struggle leads then to the fourth thesis. The relation between comrades is mediated by fidelity to a truth. Practices of comrades materialize this fidelity, building its truth into the world. And I'm going to explain what this means. Mediated here means that the comrade relation isn't automatic or natural. It doesn't just happen because of who a person is. Recall, identity is the other of the comrade. That was the third thesis. So the question then is what mediates the relation between comrades, right? If it's not natural, it doesn't just automatically happen, what mediates it? What makes it possible? For example, we would say that marriage mediates the relation between husband and wife, as well as husband and wife and wife. Some people don't want that kind of mediation of their relationship, so they choose not to get married. So what then mediates the relation between comrades? If we use the example from Marx, we would say that the party, whether understood as the formal party or as the party in the sense of broad movement, we would say that the party mediates the relation between comrades. But I think that's not a totally satisfying answer, because we know that there are those in the movement that we can't rely on, right? We don't have shared expectations of each other. They don't really seem like our comrades. And in the party, right, is it simply joining a party that makes someone our comrade? Maybe that way of thinking about it is too narrow, because we have comrades in Cuba and Venezuela and China and Korea, and we're all in different parties. So to solve this problem of either too broad or too narrow, I say that what mediates the relation between comrades is truth. Commitment to a common truth, to a view of the world that we all know to be true. That comrades are those on the same side of a political struggle points to the truth that comrades are faithful to, the political truth that unites them. The next part of the fourth thesis is practices of comradeship materialize this fidelity, building its truth into the world. And this refers to the way that our actions matter, our work matters. It's through practical work that we demonstrate our commitment to the truth that we share. We show that it has impact on how we act and what we do. For example, it's because we know that capitalist and imperialist exploitation and oppression immiserates most of the world's people that we organize and fight against it. It's not just theory or book knowledge, it's truth that impacts our action in the world. So I want to keep trying to illustrate this point regarding this sort of fourth thesis on comradeship that involves the mediating role of a shared truth. I want to illustrate this some more by going back to the film clip, right? In Ninotchka, Nina Ivanovna Yakushova can't tell who her comrades are by looking at them. She's been sent to, actually she's sent to Paris by Moscow to go find these small trade officials who had actually become really bourgeois and weren't doing what they're supposed to do. So Moscow has sent her there. And so she knows she's supposed to look for these guys, but she doesn't know who they are, right? So she has to ask. After Ivanov identifies himself, Yakushova tells him her name and the name and position of the party comrade who authorized her visit. Ivanov introduces Bulyanov and Kopalsky. Yakushova then addresses each one as comrade. But it's not the address that makes them comrade. Just calling someone comrade doesn't mean you're comrades. In the movie, they're comrades because they're members of the same party. The party is the organized body of truth that mediates their relationship. And this mediation makes clear what is expected of comrades: disciplined, faithful work. Ivanov, Bulyanov, and Kopalsky have actually not been doing the work expected of comrades, which is why Moscow sent Yakushova to oversee them in Paris. That Kopalsky says they would have greeted her with flowers demonstrates their embourgeoisement, right? The degeneration of their sense of comradeship. But they are all there for work. Gendered identity and hierarchy don't mediate relations between comrades. The practices of fidelity to a political truth, the work done toward building that truth in the world, does. The solidarity of comrades in political struggle arises out of this intertwining of truth, practice, and party, and it's not reducible to any one of these alone. Comrades are not simply those who believe in the same truth, as in, for example, the idea of communism. Their fidelity to a certain truth is manifested in practical political work. Work for the realization of a political truth brings people into comradely relation. But carrying out similar tasks in fidelity to the same truth isn't enough, right? It's not sufficient for comradeship. The work has to be in common. No one is a comrade on their own. Practices of comradeship are coordinated and organized, And the party is the organization out of which comradeship emerges, and that comrade relations produce. It concentrates comradeship even as comradeship exceeds it. So just as there are these 4 theses on the comrade that I've been developing, so does the comrade actually have 4 primary characteristics. And I'm going to end by saying a little bit about these 4 primary characteristics. And they are discipline, joy, enthusiasm, and courage. First, comradeship is a disciplining relation. Expectations and the responsibility to meet them constrain individual action and generate collective capacity. Comrades learn to push against immediate self-interest and the desire for personal comfort or advancement. They push that aside for the sake of the party, the movement, and the struggle. Lenin famously and frequently spoke of the need for discipline in the Revolutionary Party. He talked about rigorous discipline, proletarian discipline, iron discipline, socialist discipline, comradely discipline, and so on. Party discipline generally referred to the expectations of unity in action, free discussion, and criticism. Proletarian or labor discipline differed insofar as it pointed to the new organization of labor under socialism, the voluntary organization of class-conscious workers. Rather than being subjected to the will of the bosses, the forces of the market, or the tyranny of the wage, the conscious and voluntary initiative of the workers yields new gains in productivity, more advanced techniques of production. The working class demonstrates through proletarian discipline that capitalists and landlords are superfluous. We don't need them. We can and will do it ourselves. In each kind of discipline, what matters is that discipline is freely accepted. For Lenin, discipline itself is revolutionary, more revolutionary than the defeat of the bourgeoisie. He writes, "For it is a victory over our own conservatism, indiscipline, petty bourgeois egoism, a victory over the habits left as a heritage to the worker and peasant by accursed capitalism." Through comradely discipline, we make one another stronger. Our commitment to working together toward our common goal works back on us, enabling us to surmount and maybe even abolish those individualist attributes produced by capitalism. We can make mistakes, right? We do make mistakes. We can, we do, we will, and we learn and change. By recognizing our own inadequacies, we come to understand the need to be generous and understanding toward the shortcomings of others. We develop an appreciation for strengths and talents that we had previously been unable to see. We become a new kind of collectivity. So that's discipline. Accompanying comradely discipline is joy, which is the second characteristic of the comrade. The joy of discipline is internal and external, felt by comrades and experienced by those who witness how discipline changes the world. Through the intense collectivity that discipline enables, comrades can do the impossible. They are liberated from prior expectations and constraints. Joy accompanies the sense of collective invincibility. Together we made it happen, and we did it for purposes larger than ourselves. Comrades do their work with enthusiasm, which is the comrade's third characteristic. In What Is to Be Done, Lenin repeatedly praises the energy of the German Social Democrats. He repeatedly criticizes his economist comrades for their lack of energy, and he calls upon his party to increase its energy. In his conversation with Clara Zetkin on the woman question, Lenin speaks highly of the energy and enthusiasm of the party's women comrades, adding, "I forget for the moment who said, one must be enthusiastic to accomplish great things." Enthusiasm, or energy, is expected of comrades because it's that extra, that surplus benefit of collectivity which enables us to do more and even to win. What distinguishes comrades from politically minded and hardworking individuals is the energy that accrues to our collective work. Because we combine forces, we generate more than each of us could by working alone. The fourth attribute of the comrade is courage. We saw that in the description of Gorky's short story, Comrade, right, that I talked about at the beginning. We saw there the courage that Comrade inspires in those hailed as comrades. They become powerful enough to break the chains of servitude, escape the confines of misery, and stand up against oppression. Chinese Communist Party leader Liu Shaoqi describes the revolutionary courage of the communist as an effect of comradely discipline. Quote, having no selfish motives, the communist has nothing to fear. Having done nothing to give himself a guilty conscience, he can lay bare and courageously correct his mistakes and shortcomings. Because he has the courage of righteous conviction, he never fears the truth, courageously upholds it, spreads it, and fights for it. So the courage of the comrade is not an individual virtue, it's an effect of discipline, the strength that arises as a result of the self-denial in the service of common struggle. Comradely courage includes the capacity for self-discipline. Includes the capacity for self-criticism, the capacity to admit to being wrong or not knowing, and then to correct any errors through further study and work. The Bolsheviks linked courage to being steadfast, unwavering, unyielding, and resolute, to the capacity to endure and prevail under enormous hardship. And again, it's because we have our comrades that we are able to endure and prevail. So to sum up, I've been talking about 4 different theses on the comrade. 1, comrade names a relation characterized by sameness, equality, and solidarity. For communists, the sameness, equality, and solidarity is utopian, cutting through the determinations of capitalist society. 2nd, anyone but not everyone can be a comrade. 3rd, the individual as a locus of identity is the other of the comrade. And 4, the relation between comrades is mediated by fidelity to a truth. Practices of comradeship materialize this fidelity, building its truth into the world. I've also emphasized 4 attributes of the comrade: discipline, joy, enthusiasm, and courage. So that's it until next week, and I'm interested in hearing what you all think about these ideas and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Comrade. Thank you, Comrade Jodi. I'm pretty sure comrades are clapping you up and giving you a strong cheer right about now. So there were a couple of questions that I had, but just being cognizant of the time, I think we'll chop those down and see if we have more questions from the crowd. We're nice. Just getting some praise in the chat. So the first question I wanted to pose to you is, you speak about this theory of the comrade, that scientific socialism had, theories of a vanguard, theories of a united front, and other theories of modes of organization, and how they, how communists are to relate in them. I was wondering if you could speak to why or what necessitates a theory or theory of the comrade, of the comrade form, and how does identity square in this theory of the comrade? Some readings of this could be that, well, my identity is now eradicated, or is identity overlooked? So what place does it play in the understanding of comrade, the form in comradeship? So let's start there, and then we'll see where we're at in a couple minutes. Word.
Yeah, thanks so much, Comrade Nino. I really appreciate that question. So I think I see, well, I was motivated to work on a theory of a comrade for 2 reasons. And the first reason is that for so many people, particularly in the US and Canada, the UK, EU, since 1989, or since the kind of defeat of the Soviet Union, the ideas and expectations and norms and common sense that was part of the communist movement has been lost, right? People in parties like ours have carried that with them, but for many people who aren't in parties like ours, they just have lost all awareness of what that tradition has been about. And so the first thing is I felt like I was restoring a kind of lost knowledge and trying to bring it back into prominence. It's sort of it was like a kind of communist common sense that had been lost. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I think that one of the manifestations of the loss of this kind of knowledge of comradeship and of the comradely relation has been these liberal bourgeois effects that are hyper individualistic. And like, I'm going to just give an example. Like before I was in PSL and went to some kind of other organizing groups for, you know, for other movement things, like people would come in and everyone would come into the group meeting because they were, let's say, angry about something that was going on. I'll just use the example about the police in the community. And what the organizer did was ask each person about their particular individual thing. Like, what is about your individual thing? Breaking up the fact that people were already there for a collective purpose. And so it was like their individual stuff now replaced the collective moment, and the collective stuff then had to be regenerated all over again. And so my sense has been that because of just the unbelievable amount of individualism that is so dominant in capitalist society, that it remains necessary to hold up a form of political relation that doesn't prioritize every individual's individual thought. I mean, another way to put that same thing, I think both of these are connected. Maybe this is the dialectical combination of these two points. It's like, you know, it's like people need to know how to follow. And it seems to me like too many people aren't willing. Like what I like about being in PSL is I like being a follower. Like I like being able to follow the lead of my comrades and to be able to be expected to do certain things because we follow and we follow our party's lead, which is who we are. And so I think that this combination of recognizing the kind of history of the communist movement, getting rid of individualism that's so pervasive, and like learning the importance of being able to follow, strike me as really, as wide a theory of the comrades important.
Well, definitely. Thank you for that, Comrade. I think very connected to the question of discipline and organization, because we do know that the bourgeoisie, they have their discipline and they do have their cadres and comrades that do follow their instructions, hence us being in this predicament.
Mm-hmm.
So this next question is, I guess, in the same vein, right? That in the caricature of communists being an homogenous just grouping where everyone is interchangeable and they're almost robotic. Speaking to those same anxieties of not being able to know who is a communist because it's based on the political convictions. So how does the theory of Comrade speak to that caricature in a dialectical way? So obviously it's a caricature, but there is, some strain of truth to pull out of it. And how does the question of friendship in that relationship play into comradeship or not? Because I do know that you kind of had a distinction amongst friendship and comradeship. And if there are any examples that you could speak to.
Mm-hmm. So, like, I think with respect to friendship, like, friendship really requires that we are caring for and concerned with our friend in all of their individuality, right? Actually, the Greek philosopher Aristotle it has a very elaborate discussion of friendship in his Nicomachean Ethics. That's kind of like a kind of standard philosophical account of friendship. And it's really like one can't have a lot of friends because you're really, with friendship, you're really anchored in the excellence of the other person. You really want to make sure that they are living to their potential, that you're meeting their needs, that their needs are being met. But with comrades, like, you need a bunch of comrades, right? It's like you have to have a bunch of comrades in order to get things done, right? It's like we want our numbers of comrades to grow. We want to have more and more so that we get more and more capacity. Is it about them for their own individual benefit? I mean, we're not against their individual benefit, but we want them to have comrades to join the struggle because together we make a better world. So I think that the mental shift, let me try another example. Like I was thinking about this as like the comrade relation is instrumental. Like together we are all like tools or instruments or weapons in the struggle. So if we got a toolbox, we're going to want to have different sorts of tools, like a hammer and a screwdriver and some measuring tape and these different things. And if we're going to measure stuff, you know, the hammer is not going to be the very best thing to use, right? The measuring tape is going to be better to use. So we're going to have these distinct skills or talents that our different tools have. But what matters is what we're building together, right? What we're trying to tear down together, right? We're trying to tear down the oppressive, you know, imperialist, racist, capitalist system and build something new. And so we need different tools for that. But it's not like we're doing this for the benefit of the hammer. It's like the hammer is for the benefit of the building.
Thank you, Comrade. I'm gonna use that analogy from now on. That's actually pretty spot on. So thank you for that. So it is 5:42. There is one last question. I think you kind of touched upon it already. Of just why does, you know, comradeship, you say, require a degree of alienation, and how does that configure if we're fighting a system that produces alienation? So that's my last question. And if to other folks on the webinar, if you can type your questions into the chat. I see one question already, but we have about roughly 10-12 minutes left. But if you could speak to that, Jodi.
Okay, so I think it's important for us to maybe think about alienation in different ways, right? We have a kind of sort of everyday common sense version of alienation, which is like this, I can't see myself in this world, or this world is really like, I don't feel like myself when I have to do this crappy job. Like this job sucks so much, like I'm not really realizing my skills and my talents and myself as I do this in this job. And so I'm alienated from it. That's kind of one way. There are other ways that one might think about it. It's like when we make something, let's say like the worker, you know, makes, I don't know, Beanie Babies on the assembly line and like really does not feel totally fulfilled and see the Beanie Babies as something that they're happy about using their skills to make. Again, so they're alienated from the doggone, you know, stuffed animal Beanie Babies. They don't feel like they're alienated from it. Okay, that's a slightly different from the first version that I discussed. The first version was kind of like a psychological alienation. The other one was more like an alienation in work that's really material. But we can also say there's a kind of alienation that's like, I don't fully know who I am, or I can't say everything that I want to say because I don't have the words for it. And this last kind is something that psychoanalytic theory brings into the discussion, which is says, well, actually, you know, we can never really say everything we think. We can't ever, we don't have, that's what it is to be someone who uses language, right? That's something about being a language being, or like, you know, we have weird dreams. Like, what was that about? It's like, we don't really always know our unconscious. And like, sometimes we don't know what we really want as an individual person. And that third kind of alienation is maybe something that's not so bad. Maybe it's just part of what it is to be a human being. And so if we start trying to think about all these together, we can start to say, well, which sort of alienation do we want to fight against? We really want to fight against capitalist alienation. But does that mean that everything that we do, we have to be fully self-present and 100% self-fulfilled in? That seems like a kind of a tall order, you know, especially if like there's real tasks that have to get done, right? Like I may not feel like super wonderful about setting up and taking down the chairs for every meeting, but that kind of doesn't matter, right? Like how I feel about putting the chairs up and down is really not what it's about. What it's about is if we're going to have the meeting, we got to set up the chairs. And so here it's like some degree of, let's say, distance from my own self, right? Some like a break from self-absorption can be freeing, right? Like I don't even have to worry about how I feel about that. Let's just set up the chairs. And that's this kind of degree of alienation, I think, that we can see as having a liberating element to it, right? Everything doesn't have to be fully complete and wonderful, fulfilling. And that's like because we just have to get stuff done. Does that make sense, Nino? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, that makes sense. Definitely. I mean, as a teacher, I'm like, well, we have to clean up. It doesn't matter how we feel, you know, it just has to get done. So we have, okay, well, it looks like the question that this person asked, you kind of just answered. I'm going to read it anyways, but also encourage other folks to type into the chat any questions they have. So hearing you describe this definition of friends and comrades and their essential difference, I'm curious how Fromm, or later Bell Hooks' understanding of love applies to comrades, and how is that expression of love different from other kinds? And there's another question of the discussion of comradeship is illuminating to me when it comes to dividing party members, including myself. Can we use this theory of comradeship to help build the party, specifically when it comes to recruitment?
Oh, okay. These are both really wonderful questions. On love, I think like the reference points for me that that relate to kind of comradely love are Kollontai, and also I think there's some places where Che Guevara also talks about love. And what I recall most from Kollontai is this way that sort of comradely love is really based in equality and mutuality. And then I think, and also as I think suggested in the question from our comrade, a degree of selflessness, right? A degree of not just putting oneself first, but recognizing that there's things that are more important than one's own specific self-interest. So I would say that all of these kinds of approaches to love that like actually, you know what, who's really great on this is Hegel in the Philosophy of Right, in the section on morality, where he talks about love. He's like, in love, I realize that the person I was before is lacking. And it's like now I see, oh man, I could have been more before, but I never even knew that until I started to love you, until I, loved you. And I think that that's what comradeship opens, is like, oh, before I thought I was, doing politics or being political or fighting for the cause, I had no idea until I started really working with comrades. I think it would be like this change in awareness where you can see something, about yourself and your prior actions that maybe that Hegel associates with love. So yeah, and then what the other one is what's on recruiting party people. I think, or recruiting new party members. I would think so, because what it says is that no matter who you are, you have something to contribute, right? We need all the tools in the box. And then someone said, well, help, and think it's outside the box, right? A ladder, you also need a ladder as one of the tools, and doesn't fit in the box. So we need everything that someone can bring in. It's not who they are. It's like they're coming in to contribute something. And I think that can be a good way that comradeship lets us maybe, help develop our comrades and help recruit other people.
Awesome. Thank you for that, comrade. So we have one other question, and it looks a little, I'm not sure if it's finished, but if you could speak to the element of unity, struggle, and unity that's inherent in party building, and how comrades can combat combat individualism in inner party struggles to build higher levels of unity. If there are like maybe concrete examples or historical examples.
I think that's a really hard question. And I think it's hard for me to think of super concrete examples. But what I will say is what I've found in my own sort of experience and work is that practice, like doing the, like actually doing the, making the things, doing the work, carrying out the responsibilities that have to get done. And that might mean, you know, making the banners. It might mean going, you know, forward with the action that you're thinking about, and not letting a kind of a set of specific, you know, worries that one has as an individual become like an issue. It's just like, what matters most is the task at hand, getting the stuff done. Or another, maybe something else related to this, and this is, I've mentioned before, my son, he's lives usually in Canada and is in another party there. And one of the things he told me as I was first getting involved in PSL, he's like, you know, in any specific issue going on in your branch, he's like, it doesn't matter if you are right or wrong. He's like, that doesn't matter. He's like, if you're right, then things will go on as fine. If you're wrong, then you will learn why what your mistake was. But any little thing that's before us, like, you know, should, I don't know, like, should the headline of something be this or that? Or should we place the photos here, or some, whatever it's going to be? Or should we, you know, title the talk that we're giving this one thing? Like, people might get really invested in that, but that's not really what matters, right? Like, you can be right or wrong, but if you're right, it doesn't matter. If you're wrong, it doesn't matter. What really matters is the going forward together as a unity, right? What matters is keeping the collective alive, the group alive, the branch alive and growing, and getting the work done.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade. That's a very powerful, I think, example. There are no other questions in the chat, but I will say, just again, thank you. I was taking some notes. Definitely have some homework for myself. Going to look up Hegel on love, and yeah.
I see one last question actually about pride.
Negotiating people's pride is difficult. Is there a place for pridefulness in the theory of the comrade? So I guess
we've got to be proud of our collective work, and that would be the enthusiasm and the energy that we bring. And I think we should be proud of one another, right? Proud of our comrades' work and hold each other up. Like, one of the things that I find so wonderful is our practice of motivating for people when we have nominations and elections, right? We hold up our comrades. So that's one of the ways that we, where there's a place for pride in other people and pride in what our comrades are doing. And that practice, I think, the more we do that in our meetings and branches, the more that we learn that, you know, our comrades have our back, and they will, and good work is celebrated. So that's where I think that pride matters.
Thank you, Comrade. That's a very slamming answer to one last question. Thank you for that question. Who's that person? Word. Thank you. Peace. Thank you, Comrade. So we're approaching our time about now. Just wanted to give a reminder to comrades again that one of our very own comrades, Gloria Lariva, who's running on the socialist, who's running as an open socialist on our party's ticket, is going to be speaking tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. Eastern time. You can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. I think all streaming live, and really speaking to what do we do now, right? What is the analysis that we're putting forward after seeing, you know, Sanders drop out of the race, and obviously this pandemic is continuing. So we're gonna end it here, and we'll see you all next week, same time, same place. And I think we're going to be discussing, what is this again? The
end of comradeship. What happens when someone's not our comrade anymore?
The end of comradeship. Word. But thank you, comrades, and we'll catch you. Have a good evening. Peace.
Thanks, everybody.